wife set me up with her friend's hot sister to test my loyalty on a work trip. When I found out, I was incensed, and now she wants to fix things. Hi guys, I need some advice. I honestly don't know how to deal with this scenario. You can call me clueless. With a big capital C. Bold, italicized and underlined. I am 23 years old, and my wife, Amy, not her real name, is 22. We have been married for over 3 months. Amy is a student. She did not begin college until she was 20, so she has completed 2 years thus far. Meanwhile, I make a decent living and am the sole provider. I did not attend college but instead entered the workforce, and things have gone well for me thus far. Amy works part-time at a coffee shop throughout the summer and on weekends, but it's not much, about 15 hours a week, mostly for her own spending money, though she occasionally helps with groceries. I pay for my rent, utilities, groceries, and other household items. Amy has some student loans, but my goal is to pay off as much of her debt as possible, even if it means cutting back on other expenses. I was just promoted at my employer, moving from a union job to management. Here is where the story begins. Last week, I had to travel to headquarters for a week of training, which we term cool aid classes. I flew out the previous Sunday, but owing to a paucity of flight slots, I was unable to book a late enough return trip to complete my training on Friday, so my return flight was scheduled for Saturday morning. Amy wanted to accompany me since, as a newlywed, I imagined she couldn't live without me for a week. However, I am the only one who pays for things, and I adhere to the budget we agreed. I only use one credit card per month, and I make sure to pay it off completely before any interest is due. I calculated the cost of an additional flight, Amy's food expenses, and the cost of adding another person to the hotel room. Then I checked the budget. There just wasn't room for these additional charges. We have an emergency fund of a few $1,000s, and we've started a savings fund for a down payment on a house. It's just over $500 right now, which isn't much, but you have to start somewhere. Amy and I sat down to discuss the budget because I needed her to agree with me. When I told her it wasn't in the budget, she became upset. She asked me to charge it on my credit card, but I declined because we wouldn't be able to pay it off. She proposed tapping the emergency fund, but I clarified that this was not an emergency. I assured her that she would not suffer from my absence for a few nights. I did propose a compromise. Because the company headquarters is approximately 1,200 miles distant and some workers dislike flying, driving was an alternative. I could have leased a car and the employer would have covered the rental and petrol costs. But Amy said she'd rather fly than drive for 2 days in each direction. She was forced to stay behind because flying was not an option. Amy was disappointed that she couldn't accompany me to the airport on Sunday, but she gave me hugs and kisses and had me promise to call her. Things were going well while I was gone. Monday was fantastic. I made some valuable contacts within the firm and met some other managers from other areas. I contacted my wife at lunch after training and again before bed to reassure her that I'd be home soon. Skip ahead to Wednesday morning, and I was having the hotel's complimentary breakfast. I was almost finished when a woman approached my table and asked if she might sit down. I looked around and noticed that all of the tables were full, so I told her I didn't mind because I had additional chairs. I completed my breakfast, stood up and politely said, "Have a nice day," before going away. She jokingly asked, "You're leaving already?" I replied that I needed to get to work. She was about 3 or 4 years older than me, blonde, and attractive, not a 10, but certainly above average. I didn't think much of it at the moment. The next morning, however, I was sitting down to breakfast when the same woman approached and wanted to join me. There were open tables this time, but before I could respond, she remarked, "You ran off yesterday before I could get your name." Despite the fact that I had not agreed, she pulled out a chair and sat. I was uneasy. I am married to Amy, whom I adore. I have absolutely no desire to spend time with another woman. I wasn't very experienced with women. Amy was my 3rd girlfriend, and only the 2nd lady I'd ever slept with. We dated for 18 months before I proposed, and we got married 6 months later. Now, as I previously stated, I am nearly 3 months into my marriage. When the woman asked for my name again, I said I had to leave and wished her a good day. My wedding band was prominently displayed on my hand the entire time. I considered telling Amy about the 2 experiences with this woman but chose not to. So when I saw Amy at lunch, I didn't say it. Later that afternoon, when I returned to the hotel, I boarded the elevator and pressed the door close button. The doors abruptly came to a halt as they were about to close. A hand appeared, and the woman walked inside the elevator. When she saw me, she smiled broadly and exclaimed, "Well, look who it is." She pressed the elevator button for the 4th level, and as it began to move, She said, you know, I still don't know your name. How about joining me for a drink so we can get to know each other? Her hair looked wonderful. And her makeup was just enough to highlight her features without being caked on, like it was intended to hide deficiencies. But I wasn't looking at her makeup. She was beaming at me, waiting for a response. The elevator came to a halt and dinged open on the 3rd story, where my room was located. I went out, held up my left hand to show her the gold band and said, I'm sorry but I'm married. Thank you for the invitation though. Have a lovely evening. I ran down the corridor to my room, not looking back in case she had followed me. When I got to my door, I looked down the corridor to ensure it was empty. Once entering my room, I decided to phone Amy and tell her about the 3 encounters. I thought honesty was the best policy. I had anticipated her to be upset, but she wasn't. The first question she asked was, is this woman prettier than me? The honest response was yes, but that is not what I told Amy. Amy isn't a 10, but she's much above average. As for me, I'll never be on a magazine cover, but I don't consider myself to be ugly, perhaps a touch above average. I've dated lovely ladies before, and this unusual woman was certainly attractive. She was taller than Amy and considerably more top-heavy, if you get my meaning. Amy is cute, more of the girl next door type, whereas this woman was more classy. Truly 2 different types. Amy is a brunette, and her long hair works for me. The truth is that I was not tempted by this woman at all. When Amy asked if the woman worked for my company, I told her I didn't know. I'd never seen her before our initial encounter on Wednesday. To avoid stumbling into her again, I decided to forego breakfast at the hotel and eat at the corporate cafeteria the next morning. On Friday morning, I left the motel early. Before going to headquarters, I stopped at the self-service bar for a cup of coffee. As I was closing the lid on my cup, I heard a familiar voice say, it would have been nice to have had a conversation to go with my drink last night. I turned to see the same woman smiling at me. She apologized, stating, I'm sorry if I came across too forward. I've been here alone for a week and thought we could converse for a little while. I told her, look, I am married and I do not want to spend time with another woman. Please leave me alone. I hastily moved away before she could answer. Sure, that was flattering, but I was quite annoyed. By this time that afternoon, I finished my training and returned to the hotel, half expecting to be ambushed again, but I arrived at my room unharmed. I called Amy, and after we talked for a while, she asked about my plans for the night. I told her I was heading to a sports bar down the street on my last night in town. I skipped a few meals to save enough money for a good steak dinner. Later, I stepped into the restaurant and sat at the bar. I planned to eat my steak, drink a beer and watch a baseball game on one of the many TVs. That seems good, right? I had ordered my dinner and was aimlessly viewing the screen when I heard that now familiar voice say, that looks good. Can I have a bite? I turned and there she was, looking lovely and dressed up in a classy way. She showed off her ample cleavage and wore a short dress with stockings, definitely trying to grab my attention. Before I could say anything, she sat down and inquired how my day had gone. I gathered my thoughts and informed her, I've already told you, I don't want to spend time with you. I do not want to talk to you. I don't care what your name is. She replied, it's Susan, and extended her hand. I did not shake it. I told her all I wanted was to eat my food in privacy and for her to leave me alone. She grimaced briefly, then chuckled and added, just take a drink with me. I pledged to behave. I won't bite unless you want me to, she said with a mischievous smirk. She ordered a drink and said she'd be right back before leaving to what I imagined was the restroom. I grabbed my wallet, slapped down some cash for dinner, and fled out the door. I left my steak sitting at the bar. I returned to the hotel, irritated because, first, I did not receive the remainder of my steak, and second, I paid with my own money rather than the company's since I did not wait for the receipt, so I had nothing to turn in for reimbursement. Return it to the hotel, but by the time they arrived, she would have returned. I received a poor burger from the hotel and ate it in my room, which the employer paid for. I called Amy before bed to tell her about the botched supper. She apologized and promised to cook me a delicious lunch when I got home tomorrow. That's one thing I have to admit. Amy is an excellent cook. Because she only works a few hours per week, she handles the cooking, cleaning and laundry. We talked about what we could do this weekend, said I love you, I miss you, and then hung up. But I went to bed pissed off. I missed out on a wonderful steak. I was angry with the woman who was harassing me, and I was even angrier at myself for not asserting myself more. I'm not sure why I didn't just stand my position, finish my steak and go on. That night, I didn't sleep well. When I arrived home on Saturday morning, Amy greeted me enthusiastically. Before I could go back to retrieve my luggage, and unpack. She dragged me into the bedroom for some fun. We're still in the honeymoon phase, so intimacy is fairly often. Even midday afternoon sex is uncommon, but since I had been gone for a week, let's just say I was extremely welcome. We then spent approximately 10 minutes cuddling in bed. I was simply enjoying being with her when she broke the stillness by telling me how much she loved me and kissing me. She told me she was proud of me and kissed me again, and I assumed it was because of my recent job promotion. But then she kissed me again and said she was proud because I passed the test. What test? I asked, completely perplexed. She laughed and said, "You know, the test." I didn't understand what she was saying, so I told her so. Then she added, "That woman, Susan, you passed the test with her." I was completely confused. I rolled out from under Amy, supported myself on my elbows, and begged her to explain. She smiled, apparently pleased with herself, and explained, "Susan was at your hotel because I asked her to be." Amy continued, "I know she's prettier than me, and I knew you were totally uninterested in her, so I wanted to test you." I sat there, trying to make sense of what she had just said. Amy bent over, kissed me again, and got out of bed, headed for the restroom. She began talking to me from inside, but I was not listening. This was not a test. It was a setup. I told her I didn't appreciate being set up like that. These weren't simply routine tests. When Amy returned to the bedroom, she climbed onto the bed and urged me not to worry about it. "You died, and I adore you for that." She attempted to kiss me again, but I pushed away. I was angry. I began questioning her. Who was this woman? How did she know her? And why would she come to my hotel to test me? I was able to obtain a few details after some argument, with Amy becoming defensive and now angry at me for being mad at her. Susan was the older sister of one of Amy's close friends, Jessica. Amy and Jessica apparently hung together on Sunday after I departed for the airport. Jessica suggested that I consider what I would do if a beautiful woman approached me while on my trip. After some deliberation, they contacted Susan, and the three of them devised this crazy scheme. I asked Amy why she didn't trust me. She insisted she did. When I questioned why she felt the need to set me up if she trusted me, she became defensive again. She blamed Jessica for sowing seeds of doubt in her mind. At that moment, I was outraged. I asked her how Susan got to the city I visited and where she stayed. Amy became quite silent. I increased my voice, and I'm not sure if I started yelling. Amy began crying. More responses, more crying, and me yelling. Finally, I stormed out of the apartment, leaving her sobbing in her hands, insisting that it was not her fault. I slammed the door behind me. Amy had paid for Susan's trip, 4 nights in a hotel, her meals, and even paid her $100 per day for her time. I informed Amy that she couldn't accompany me since we couldn't afford the advance purchase price of an airline ticket, a few meals, and $10 per night for a second person. This was a full fare ticket for 4 nights, at more than $150 per night. How much did all this cost? I haven't added it all up yet, but I can say this. The emergency money is nearly depleted. Because we need an emergency fund, the down payment fund will be transferred to the emergency fund, which has now been depleted as well, all because she let someone to implant dumb ideas in her mind. After leaving, I called my coworker, Jacob, and told him I wanted to speak with someone. Jacob and I had worked together for a few years before he moved into management 6 months ago. He coaxed me into coming over. He had a number of other buddies over, but invited me to join them. I told them what had happened, and one of them suggested Amy had performed a crap test on me. I had never heard of it, but I suppose you are aware of what it is. They reprimanded me for marrying so young. I assumed that was what we were meant to do. They advised me that we should maintain separate bank accounts. I grew up thinking we were meant to combine our assets. Then they chastised me about Amy being an authorized user on my credit card. Okay, I understand how this could have been avoided, but locking the gate now does nothing, because the horse has already left. One of the guys recommended I watch some YouTube videos. We saw a couple together, after cooking some steaks. Unfortunately, I was too unhappy to eat, so the entire lunch was spoiled. He also told me to write to you, which is what I'm doing. In the end, it's only money. And while I can rebuild my finances, that isn't the purpose. She absolutely ignored everything I was trying to do to alleviate her insecurities. She also set me up. Can I get through this? Amy and I married because we adore each other. I've always seen her as a nice, kind and caring woman, but now I'm torn. What she did has made me rethink who she truly is. I've never set boundaries with Amy. Will it work to sit her down and set them now, or is it too late? That horse is already out. Can you have a relationship with clear boundaries if they are established later and expected to work? I would like to make this work with Amy. Amy began blowing up my phone, but I ignored it. Then it was my parents, and finally hers. A few of her pals had also texted me, but I ignored them all. I finally shut off the phone. After spending some time with Jacob, I didn't want to deal with any of them right now. Jacob invited me to stay with him for a few days to sort things out. I would love to hear your comments on this. I'm not sure what my alternatives are. My inexperience has gotten me into this mess, and I need to get my head out of my sass before I suffocate and figure it out. Here are a few things that need to happen. 1. She does not return to school until she repays this sum. 2. Create separate bank accounts. 3. As long as we're married, she won't take out any additional student loans. She pays for them herself. 4. I have already removed her from my credit card and requested that a new card with a different number be supplied. 5. I'm also considering telling her no more Jessica or Susan. She cuts them off totally. Proper now, I don't trust her to make the proper decisions. I got on my phone and texted Amy and both of our parents, telling them I was figuring out how I was going to handle the situation. I told Amy that I would take a sick day tomorrow and come by in the morning to chat to her. Until then, everyone should leave me alone. I am ignoring all texts and voicemails. A nudge in the correct direction would be highly appreciated if you have time to do so. Thank you everyone.